8:46 a.m. A plane flown by terrorists crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. 9:03 a.m. A second plane crashes into the South Tower. 9:37 a.m. A third plane crashes into the Pentagon, Washington, D.C. 10:07 a.m. A fourth plane crashes. This form of terrorism and extremism still threatens the world today. For most who are old enough to remember, it's the day that is impossible to forget. In many ways, 9/11 reshaped how Americans think of war and peace, their own personal safety, and their fellow citizens. It has now been 2 decades since the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the crash of Flight 93, where only the courage of passengers and crew possibly prevented an even deadlier fourth terror attack. But as it was, approximately 3,000 people were killed, countless more were injured, and the world was stunned.
An American journalist remembers the event, and like millions of people across the globe, wondered why it happened.
A bit of background on how my journey started. I was a senior at Yale University, and I was studying comparative literature. I was focused specifically on Russian, French, and Italian literature. And I wasn't particularly what you would call a news junkie, but the first week of my senior year of college, 9/11 happened. And in one moment, I think, like many Americans, my world was kind of turned upside down. And I suddenly became aware more keenly than ever that I had been oblivious. And I felt ashamed that I had been so unaware and so detached from these hugely important geopolitical currents that were running and had really resulted in this extraordinary, heinous act of terrorism. And so in that moment, first of all, I became an absolute news junkie. I was addicted to the news. I couldn't stop watching it, couldn't stop reading it. And I became consumed with this idea that I needed to be part of this in some way. And what I felt or believed or hoped at that time my contribution might be was to act as a communicator between different worlds, to essentially try to go to the tip of the spear, wherever that was, to get a better understanding why this had happened, who was responsible for it, where the hatred came from, and to get a better perspective, honestly, not just on how I saw myself as an American, but how the rest of the world saw America, because it was very clear to me in that moment that there was a huge chasm between the way we perceived ourselves as a nation and the way the rest of the world perceived us. A little bit of background.
Like Clarissa Ward, we must question why these terrible events occurred. We must remember the people who gave their lives in rescue attempts in New York and Washington. Those who worked day and night to save others, and of course, those who lost family and friends. Today, that 20th anniversary is particularly important because in the past month, the Taliban have returned to power in Afghanistan. It is crucial that we take the time today to find out why these events are linked.
It might seem difficult for us to imagine why so much hatred can exist between people, but like so many events, we must delve into the past to find the causes. During the Cold War, America had often supported minority groups who were fighting against communist Russia. By the 1970s, the US saw that Russia was weakening, and wanting to weaken her further, goaded Russia into overstretching her resources. They decided to provoke the Russians into invading Afghanistan by sending secret aid to troublemakers in the region. The plan worked, and a furious Russia invaded Afghanistan in 1979. The US then allied themselves with the Mujahideen, minority Islamic group in Afghanistan, and championed them as freedom fighters against Russian oppression.
The Mujahideen went on to found the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, two brutal regimes. As late as March 2001, the USA was still sending tens of millions of US dollars to support the Taliban. But following the brutal attack of 9/11, the stunned American nation was determined to root out such terrorism. The US government insisted that the Taliban immediately hand over any terrorists and close their training camps in Afghanistan or face an attack from the United States. When they refused, Operation Enduring Freedom was launched on October 7, 2001, less than a month after the attacks of 9/11.
In a US-led campaign, the Taliban was forced from the country and a new regime was put in place. The man behind the 9/11 bombings, Osama bin Laden, was killed, and America was determined that Afghanistan would become a new, democratic country where terrorism would not be nourished. Protected by American and British peacekeeping, the people did indeed begin to build a new, more democratic country where girls were allowed to go to school and women could work for the first time.
But in April 2021, President Joe Biden announced that US military forces would leave Afghanistan by this September. By the end of July, the United States had completed nearly 95% of its withdrawal, leaving just 650 troops to protect the US Embassy in Kabul. The speed of the American withdrawal has left Afghanistan in chaos, with people desperately trying to flee the country, fearful of Taliban rule and how this will impact on their lives. Charities warn of a humanitarian crisis, and the future for women and girls in particular looks uncertain.
Today, 20 years after 9/11, when the world watched with horror while the terrorists flew those planes into the Twin Towers, we watch in horror while the Taliban retakes control of Afghanistan. Let us remember those people who died whether in the planes, in the buildings, in the streets, or those heroic men and women who tried to rescue the others. Let us remember those who are in Afghanistan today, frightened and alone. We must talk about their stories, bear witness to their plight, and always look to promote peace between people. Like the people who died or suffered in any way from the events 20 years ago tomorrow, we must remember and honour them. Let us stand and pause for a moment to pray that there is peace in the world in which we live in.